Lovely to have you with us, Luca and Gio, and what a fantastic and wonderfully rich film that you have made. Your documentary tracks, I think, a part of our cultural history collectively as a culture. Douglas Kirkland, his contribution to tracking portraits of famous film stars, his work on over 150 films, what an incredibly rich way to track the influence of popular culture. So what was it that initially inspired you to do a documentary about Douglas Kirkland's life?
Well, thank you first of all for having us and for choosing our film and for screening it. So it was really random, the beginning of how this film started. The main starting point came out when a good friend of mine, who is also the director of photography of the film, Gianfilippo De Rossi, told me about this amazing photographer who I did not recall the name, but obviously I knew his pictures. He has been his assistant for a while in his photo studio. And once he invited me to join him on a Sunday brunch, because Douglas and his wife, Francoise, they host these amazing brunches where actually part of the cast is frequently involved. And when I walked inside his home in Los Angeles, not far from where I live, I found myself completely surrounded by all these amazing and iconic pictures, and I started to recognize many of them. And I think that was the spark to start thinking about what was behind these pictures, and clearly what was behind the man who took these pictures. And after a while, and after a few proposals that we provided to him and Francoise, he accepted. He accepted because he kind of trusted our idea, of course. He has a very strong connection with Italy, and most of our team is actually made of Italians. And I think he found out that we had really a very strong passion and attachment, and we were really grateful for his work, as I think everyone should be, no matter if you know him or not, because as you actually said, these pictures brought a lot into the life of every one of us. Doesn't matter if you're really into photography or not.
So one of the things that Sharon Stone talks about at the beginning of the documentary is the impact that the image has. And she says the image has power. And Douglas Kirkland has this amazing way of really getting to the person behind the camera in a way that you don't get to access through cinema when you're seeing someone acting. So he has this kind of incredible notion of how he brings out the personality. And with Marilyn Monroe, it was his very careful coaxing of Marilyn, his non-predatory way. This strikes me as something really interesting, to make a documentary about someone that is such an incredible photographer, because it must have been quite intimidating for you as filmmakers to try and capture some of I guess the characteristics of his work and the essence of that person behind the camera when you're looking at Douglas Kirkland himself. How did you do that? Like, what were the things that you thought about in terms of how you made and put this documentary together to try and capture some of the essence of Kirkland?
I'll talk about from a director point of view, and I'll let Giovanni talk about the production point of view. For me, one of the things that I thought about since the very beginning was I'm not an expert in photography, and I'm not necessarily too passionate about photography. So my biggest concern was, how do I explain the way that Douglas Kirkland became one of the best photographer in the world? What is peculiar in his heart? And I thought that the best way was to have people of the same field, so of photography, explaining us what is very specific. And I think that, for example, Lauren Greenfield, who is another top photographer of our times, clearly from a totally different generation of Douglas, she explained this very well. Douglas is the best in pulling out the best out of his subjects. Doesn't matter if it's a celebrity or someone that he meets on the street. And this ability to put anybody in the best place creates a very specific atmosphere that it's visible and tangible in the picture. And I think you see that also when you are around Douglas. And so it was actually very easy for me to be able to conduct him in the direction where I thought that the documentary should have been. And also from this point of view, I didn't want to be too technical. I didn't want this documentary to be about photography. I wanted to be like about us, about the audience, because as I said at the beginning, I think everyone has been affected by these pictures. Doesn't matter if you know technicalities or not. As I always say, you know these pictures even if you never saw them, even if you've never seen them. From a production point of view, Giovanni can probably add more.
Well, I would say there is if you watch the film, you notice there is a lot of people that you might recognize, a lot of great actors and actresses and directors and photographers. And we were overwhelmed by the fact that all of them, all the people that have been photographed by Douglas, they wanted to be a part of the film. And they had a story that was unique. And adding to what Luca was saying is that showed us the fact that Douglas is very connected to those people. It doesn't take a picture, it doesn't steal anything from you. He wants to connect with you on an artistic level. And that made our life on one side easy because everybody wanted to be involved. On another side, extremely challenging because if you are interviewing Nicole Kidman or Michelle Williams or Baz Luhrmann or Guadagnino, you have to be at a certain place at a certain time, and you might have a window that is very short. So Luca had to juggle this incredible challenge to having to make in such a tiny amount of time a great moment in the film. So but yeah, Douglas is incredible. So it was easy to work with him and to get people that wanted to work with him involved.
It was, I was wondering about that you might have had very short, tight time slots for filming, for getting those people in their busy schedules. And I think a really lovely thing that you did in the film as well is talked about his wife and the influence that she's had on his career. So you gave this kind of wonderful backstory of him as a person. One of the moments that struck me the most in the film was the discussion about his photojournalism and the unemployed woman in Detroit, where he said that he couldn't give her money because it would change his relationship to the image. Could you tell us a little bit more about why it was important to you to have the photojournalism side of Kirkland within the film?
There's no way you can talk about Douglas Kirkland and avoiding to talk about his photojournalistic career for different reasons. One is that he worked with two of the top magazines of all times, Look and Life magazines. And those are also part of the cultural heritage of the world because they were the window in the world on time during times where there was no internet and television. So there's been like a stepstone in the cultural life of the world. But also because his approach also in celebrity portrait is extremely close to his photojournalistic approach. And I think Luca Guadagnino explained this very well. The way that he moves on set and the way that he interacts with the subject, or that he doesn't interact with the subject. So when he's able to step back at the right time has a lot to do with the photojournalistic career, which, by the way, lasted for, I think, 15, almost 20 years. So we're talking about a long period of time in his life and career, and it kind of overlapped in a certain way during the last part with the celebrity portrait time, which clearly, because of the people involved, made him famous and popular everywhere in the world. But I don't think it's on a different level. They're definitely at the same level, and they explain the flexibility of Douglas to adjust in times and in different contexts.
Yes, I think you did an amazing job of kind of capturing the multifaceted parts of his personality that made him, you know, because as much as you say this towards the end of the documentary, as much as it's a story about his life, it's a story about adaptability and moving with the times and being able to adjust as circumstances change. And he's done an amazing job at that. So do we have any questions coming in from the audience right now? I've got a couple more questions to ask you, but I'd just like to encourage all of you listening to please send them in if you have some questions, because we have some wonderful people here that are able to ask. So one of the things that I found quite interesting was the idea of how you, I guess, edit together such a kind of long career and create a story of that, because that's quite a difficult thing, isn't it, when you're looking at a long period of someone's life and you're a filmmaker and as a director and as a producer, how you then grab all that content and to create your own kind of narrative or way of making sense of that life. So what was sort of some of the processes that you thought about in terms of structuring the film? What was the journey that you wanted to take the audience on?
Since the very beginning, I wanted to talk about everything. I couldn't figure what could be left out. And so I wanted to split the story into different decades and navigate through those times, because I think that it's probably something I could talk about. I have the ability to talk about, and more than the technical aspects of photography. So it was really important to me to bring the audience into something that they could recognize and feel themselves, and into those moments, feeling close, feeling bonding with Douglas's story. And so that was very clear from the beginning. I think the hardest part for me was, again, to choose what to take out. And mostly I would say, I'm thinking about his archive. Douglas Kirkland has an archive of almost, I think, more than 1 million pictures.
Wow.
So it's just huge. So that selection, that process was definitely the hardest part for me.
I saw you got quite a lot of the significant films and significant people in there, even Baz Luhrmann, you know, talking about those Moulin Rouge photographs are just absolutely exceptional. And I love the way that you brought in the behind the scenes details in terms of how that was created and how Luhrmann introduced him on the set and really gave him a kind of open license to capture those moments.
Douglas and Baz are very close. They're also personal friends, not only, you know, colleagues in a way.
Oh, we've got a question coming in here from an audience member. Is celebrity culture something that you're interested in generally? And I'll pose this to both of you because I think you both probably got some very interesting perspectives on this. Is celebrity culture something you're interested in generally, or was Douglas too compelling regardless of the celebrity connections?
You?
So I want to say Douglas and Francoise are a very unique type of people in Los Angeles. They have worked with everybody, and they continue to work with everybody because they are fascinated by the people more than the status of those people and the way they in their life those people. That question without having celebrity in
That's true. That is very true. What are your that question? Luca?
Yeah, I think that as filmmakers or in general people who works or who work in the show business, you can't avoid to think, learn, and analyze the history of show business, because it's all extremely linked, and it kind of repeats himself as history in general repeats himself. You can't ignore Marilyn Monroe even if you're not into actresses, or even if you're not into cinema anyway, because that character, that personality affected many aspects of your life and of your style in a way that you don't even think about anymore. And and it's the same for many other aspects. You can't ignore the way that Stanley Kubrick builds a scene, as well as even more recent times Spielberg. These huge names are not huge only because they're pretty and they're good and they make a lot of money. They're huge also because they are part of our lives in many ways. So I think that, yeah, celebrity culture, it's definitely something that it's into me, into our team in general, but it's also into everyone who at least it's interested into show business, and in every kind of show business, every industry in the show business industry.
Yes, you're right. And popular culture plays such an incredible, well, a very important role in, I guess, kind of where we situate ourselves as groups, how we communicate with each other, what we look like, what our attitudes are to life. Like, these images are things that would have impacted on all of us. And with the global nature of Hollywood, it's something that goes far further than America and gets circulated around the world, So you both have made a really important contribution, I think, in terms of charting part of our cultural history and giving us access behind the scenes to a man that everybody knows. And as you say, Luca, it might be that you've seen his images, but you don't know who the man is himself. A very kind of sensitive portrayal. We've got another question here coming in. Was there anything that Doug did not want or did not allow you to cover in the film? Oh, that's a tricky question, isn't it?
Giovanni may help me to remember this. There was no boundaries, really, as far as I remember. There were some minor details that would have been too long and too complicated to discuss, to talk, and so we left them out because, again, it would have taken the place of other more important things. One thing, for example, that I'm sorry about, but Douglas has nothing to do with it, is that we were not able to have Douglas's daughters in the film more, because clearly Mark Kirkland is in the film, but he also has two other daughters, but they live very far and they are completely out of the show business and the film industry. The schedule really did not permit for us to reach them and film when they were available. And so I think, yeah, that is something that I would involve them more, but there was just no way. Other than that, no, I don't recall any boundary placed by either Douglas or Francoise. Joe?
We had a couple of limits in terms of licensing and things that we could do, but we were lucky enough to have Douglas archive wide open. He was one of the very few photographer who kept their archive. They own their own archive. So we had extreme freedom for pretty much everything that he did. Again, there is a couple of limitation with, I believe, with some picture he took on the set of Thriller, for example.
Yeah, there was just some copyrights limits. Not that Douglas didn't want us to use those, but there were just some legal terms that we could not just overcome.
Yeah, but other than that, no, not at all.
I suppose it helps that you befriended him first. So you'd already built that relationship and were able to talk to him as a person rather than being someone that he didn't know, kind of investigating his life. Really certainly helps in terms of building a rapport and trust. So can you tell us a little bit more about your upcoming film, Canonize Me, and do you have a release date yet?
Yes. So no, we don't have a release date yet. We are in the middle of like a very long post-production process because that's another documentary. Told a different scenario and place. So a few years ago in Rome occurred a very specific situation. The actual Pope and the ex-Pope were canonizing two dead popes. And so for the first time, like in human history, there were four popes, either dead or alive, in the same square, in St. Peter's Square in Rome. Clearly, this attracted many people. I think that over a weekend, more than 1.5 million of people of all different kinds reached Rome. And as it frequently happens to me, when I see something like this, I feel the need to record that. And so we started to shoot in the city with 5 different cameras, and we collected a lot of footage, and we built a story that starts from a very wide question, which is, what is the canonization process? Because it's not sanctification, it's a very specific process. And it's curious to record that many people had different opinions about it, not from a technical point of view, but from an emotional point of view. So what that moment meant to all these different people. And so I think that was really interesting. Doesn't matter if you're a believer or not. It was an interesting moment for the city, for the church, for believers, for non-believers, for just citizens of the city. And so the process has been quite long because we had to go through all this huge amount of different stories, select the best ones, but we're almost there. It's going to be a pretty fun and I think exciting and very various documentary as well, I think.
And of course, your crew is everywhere at the moment, aren't they? You were just telling me that you're in Venice, California, and Italy today. So it must be quite challenging making films across multiple places.
We travel a lot, definitely. I'm in Italy at the moment, near Venice, Italy. Giovanni is in Venice, California, in Los Angeles. We have an office in Hollywood, in Los Angeles. Our main branch is in Los Angeles. And then we have a subsidiary company and office in Rome, where the third producer, Matteo Laurini, is at the moment. But then our work is everywhere. So yeah, we definitely travel a lot. Giovanni is actually packing, I think, in these days.
Yeah, I'll be leaving in 3 days. So I'll joining Italy soon.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you, Giovanni. And thank you.
We're sorry we couldn't be in New Zealand. You know, we're really sorry we couldn't be in New Zealand in these days.
It was just absolutely wonderful to hear all of your insights